Elena moved quickly around the living room, trying to make everything perfect before dinner. She set the table with care. 2 plates, 2 glasses, candles lit just enough to make the room glow softly. It was Friday night, the one evening she always looked forward to. She wanted to feel like the old days, when she and her husband Michael laughed over wine and danced after dinner for no reason at all. But lately things had changed. Michael came home late, spoke less and smiled even less. The man who once pulled her close during slow songs now barely looked up from his phone. She turned on the radio, hoping music might bring back a spark. The sound of bachata filled the room, warm, rhythmic, full of emotion. The beat instantly reminded her of their first date 20 years ago, when he had awkwardly tried to dance with her at a small restaurant in Miami. He had no rhythm back then, but his effort had made her fall for him. She smiled at the memory, and, with a little courage, walked to the couch where he sat scrolling through emails. "Come on," she said softly, offering her hand. "Just one dance, Michael." Like before. He didn't even look up at first. "Elena, I'm tired. It's been a long week." Her hand hovered in the air for a moment before she lowered it. "Just a song," she tried again, forcing a small smile. "Maybe another time," he murmured, eyes still fixed on the screen. The words hit her harder than she expected. She turned away before he could see the disappointment on her face. She pretended to check on dinner, but her heart ached. The music kept playing in the background, its rhythm clashing against the heavy silence in the room. The candles flickered, casting small shadows that made her feel even more alone. From the hallway, Ethan, their 19-year-old son, had seen everything. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He could recognize pain when he saw it. His mom had always been the light of the house, always smiling, always holding everyone together. But lately she looked tired in a way that makeup couldn't hide. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should say something. Then he noticed her standing near the window, her hands slightly swaying with the beat of the song, like her body wanted to dance even if her heart didn't. He stepped into the room. "Mom?" She turned quickly, wiping her cheek before he noticed. "Yes, sweetheart. You love this song," he said, walking closer. She nodded, smiling weakly. "Your dad and I used to dance to it. It was our favorite." He paused, then looked at her hand still resting by her side. "Then dance now," he said with a grin. She blinked, surprised. "With who?" "With me," Ethan replied. Elena let out a small laugh. "You don't know how to dance bachata?" "Then teach me," he said simply. She hesitated. For a second, she thought about refusing. It felt strange, maybe even silly. But the sincerity in his eyes reminded her that love didn't always come from where you expected it. So she nodded. "Okay, let's try." He placed one hand awkwardly on her shoulder, and she guided his other hand to her waist. "The rhythm goes like this," she said, tapping her fingers lightly against his arm. "Step side to side, then a little tap. Just follow me." The music flowed, and they began to move, slowly at first, then a little faster as he got the hang of it. Ethan kept stepping on her toes, and every time he did, they both burst out laughing. The house that had been quiet for months suddenly filled with laughter again. "Mum, I think I'm terrible at this," Ethan said, trying to keep up with her movements. "You're better than you think," she said, smiling genuinely for the first time that night. "It's not about being perfect. It's about feeling the rhythm." As they danced, something inside Elena softened. The sadness from earlier started to fade. It wasn't the romantic dance she had wished for, but it was something even more special. It was love in another form. She looked at her son and felt proud of the young man he'd become. He wasn't trying to replace anyone. He was simply trying to remind her that she wasn't invisible. When the song ended, Ethan bowed dramatically, making her laugh again. "See? I told you I could dance." "You did great," she said, still smiling. "Better than your father on his first try." They both laughed again, unaware that Michael had quietly appeared at the edge of the hallway. He stood there, watching his wife and son together, his expression unreadable. For a moment, guilt pricked at him. He hadn't realized how far apart they'd grown. But instead of joining them, he turned and went upstairs. Elena didn't notice him leave. She was too busy replaying the joy of that short moment in her mind. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive again. The music still played softly in the background, like a heartbeat, like hope returning in small steps. When Ethan hugged her goodnight later, she held on a little longer than usual. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For reminding me what it feels like to dance again." That night, as she cleaned up the table, she looked out the window at the dark sky and smiled. Maybe happiness didn't always come from romance or grand gestures. Sometimes it came from small, unexpected moments, like dancing in the living room with your son when your heart needed it most. The radio continued to play quietly, the bachata melody lingering in the air, wrapping around her like a warm memory. And even though her husband hadn't danced with her, Elena felt a quiet strength inside, a promise to herself that she wouldn't stop moving to life's rhythm, no matter who chose to dance beside her. The next evening, the soft rhythm of bachata played again in the background. Elena hadn't planned it. The radio just happened to tune into the same station. As the melody filled the house, Ethan came downstairs, grinning. "You're listening to it again," he said, noticing her tapping her foot to the beat while setting plates for dinner. She smiled shyly. "It's a beautiful song. Makes me feel lighter." Ethan grabbed an apple from the counter and said, "Well, if you're up for it, I could use another dance lesson." She laughed, a sound that carried warmth. "You sure you're ready for more toe injuries?" "I'll take the risk," he said with mock seriousness. After dinner, they pushed the chairs aside and cleared a small space in the living room. The fairy lights were still hanging from last night, and their glow made the room feel cozy. Elena turned the volume up slightly, letting the rhythm fill every corner. "Okay," she said, taking his hand. "Remember, it's not about counting steps. It's about listening." Ethan nodded, trying to follow her lead. His movements were stiff at first, his timing off, but Elena kept smiling patiently. "Relax," she said. "You're thinking too much. Just feel it." He chuckled. "You make it sound so easy." "It used to be," she said softly, almost to herself. They moved again, side to side, their shoes brushing the floor in sync with the beat. It wasn't perfect, but something about it felt natural, like life finding its rhythm again. Every time he made a mistake, she laughed instead of scolding him, and that laughter filled the room with a comfort neither of them had felt in months. "Mom," Ethan said between steps, "how did you even learn this dance?" She smiled at the memory. "When your father and I got married, we went to the Dominican Republic for our honeymoon. There was this small cafe near the beach where people danced every night. An old woman taught me the steps. She said, 'Bachata is not about moving your feet. It's about moving your heart.'" Ethan looked at her, seeing something soft flicker in her eyes, a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. "You miss dancing with Dad, don't you?" he asked quietly. Elena hesitated. "I miss the way we used to be," she admitted. "Before life got busy. Before silence became normal." He didn't say anything, just squeezed her hand gently. They kept dancing, and soon the steps became smoother. Elena began to spin lightly, laughing when Ethan almost lost balance trying to copy her. The joy was contagious. For a few moments, it felt like the house was alive again, as if laughter had chased away the shadows that had been living there too long. From the hallway, Michael paused. He had just come home, tired and carrying his briefcase. He heard their laughter before he saw them. When he finally stepped closer, he saw his wife glowing in a way he hadn't seen for years. Her face was lit up, her cheeks flushed, her hair loose. His son held her hand, and they were laughing like old friends. It was innocent, yet it stirred something inside him. Guilt, maybe even jealousy. He realized how distant he'd become, how he had let work replace what truly mattered. He stood there silently for a few seconds, unsure whether to interrupt. But when Elena twirled and her laughter rang out again, he quietly turned away, walking upstairs. The sound of their joy followed him, echoing in the empty space between them. Downstairs, Ethan said, "You know, you should teach Dad to dance again. He'd probably surprise you." Elena smiled faintly. He used to try, but somewhere along the way he stopped wanting to. Maybe he forgot how, Ethan said softly. She looked at her son, at his kindness, his maturity. Maybe you're right. The song ended, but neither of them moved away. They stood still, catching their breath. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Then another song began, slower this time, more emotional. Without saying anything, Ethan extended his hand again. "Another one?" Elena teased. "Last one," he promised. This time, they didn't laugh or talk. They just danced quietly, letting the music fill in what words couldn't. Elena's eyes drifted toward the empty stairs, where she imagined Michael once stood, watching her, holding her, loving her. But that was a long time ago. As the music slowed, Ethan spoke softly, almost like he was thinking out loud. "Mom, you're strong. You know that? You always make things feel okay." Her chest tightened. Sometimes, pretending to be strong is the only way to keep going. He looked down, realizing how much she had been carrying alone. "You don't have to pretend around me," he said gently. Elena smiled, eyes glistening. "I know." When the song ended, Ethan pulled her into a quick hug. She hugged him back tightly, grateful beyond words. "Thank you for dancing with me," she whispered. "Anytime, Mom," he said. "Just promise me you won't stop smiling like that." She nodded, trying to hold on to the moment. "I'll try." Later that night, after Ethan went upstairs, Elena sat alone in the quiet living room. The radio was still playing faintly, and the candlelight flickered across the table. She looked around and felt something shift inside her. Not sadness, but realization. She wasn't alone in her pain, and she wasn't powerless either. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this dance wasn't just about music. It was about connection, about remembering that love takes many forms, and sometimes it finds new ways to reach you when you least expect it. As the last notes of the song faded, she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Maybe it's not too late for another dance." And upstairs, though she didn't know it, Michael stood by the window in their bedroom, listening to the same faint melody drifting through the house, a song that reminded him of everything he'd lost, and everything he still had the chance to save. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of bachata became a quiet part of their lives. Every Friday night, Ethan would come home from college classes or work, help his mother with dinner, and then they'd push the chairs aside to dance. It wasn't a grand event, but it was something they both looked forward to, their small ritual of joy. For Elena, those dances became a reminder that happiness could still exist, even when life felt heavy. For Ethan, it was a way to make sure his mother never forgot how to smile. Outside, the summer evenings grew warmer, and the neighborhood often saw them through the window. A mother and son dancing and laughing together. People would smile as they passed by, unaware of the silence that often waited upstairs, where Michael buried himself in work. He had become a ghost in his own home, always too busy, too tired, or too distracted to notice what was slipping away. One evening, the smell of roasted chicken filled the house again. Elena moved between the kitchen and living room, humming along to the soft beat coming from the radio. Ethan was setting up the table when Michael walked in. He looked at the two of them, laughing, cooking, sharing small jokes, and for a brief moment, he felt like an outsider in his own family. After dinner, Ethan turned the radio louder. "Mom, come on, it's Friday," he said with a grin. She hesitated but couldn't help smiling. "All right," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Just one song." The bachata melody filled the air again, soft and warm, full of life. Ethan took her hand and they started to move. The steps came naturally now, side, step, sway, turn. They didn't even think about it anymore. They just moved with the music, letting it carry them. Michael stood by the staircase, watching silently. The way Eleanor's eyes lit up, the way she laughed. He hadn't seen her like that in years. Something inside him ached. It wasn't jealousy in the wrong sense. It was regret. He realized how distant he had become, how much he had let work take over everything that once mattered. Watching his wife dance with their son, he saw a life he used to be part of, and it hurt. After the song ended, Ethan spun Elena around one last time and bowed playfully. She clapped and laughed, her cheeks flushed. "You're getting better every week," she teased. "That's because I have the best teacher," he replied. Michael cleared his throat quietly and stepped forward. "You two seem to be having fun," he said, trying to sound casual. Elena froze for a second, surprised to see him watching. "We were just dancing," she said softly. "I can see that," he replied, his eyes flicking between them. Then, after a pause, he added, "You look happy." Elena looked down. "It feels good to move again." Michael hesitated, then said quietly, "I didn't realize how much I've missed seeing you smile." The room grew quiet. Ethan sensed the tension and decided to give them space. "I'll go finish that essay I've been avoiding," he said, disappearing upstairs. Now it was just the two of them, Elena and Michael, standing in the dim light, the faint sound of music still playing in the background. Michael set his briefcase down. "Elena," he began, "I know I haven't been present. I thought working hard meant doing the right thing for us. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being part of us." She looked at him, unsure what to say. "I understand you've been busy," she said carefully. "But sometimes, love doesn't need big things. It just needs time. You stopped showing up." He nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "You're right," he admitted. "I've been here, but not really here." She crossed her arms, not angry, just tired. "I tried to reach you, Michael. But after a while, I stopped trying." There was silence, broken only by the hum of the radio. Then, after a deep breath, Michael said quietly, "Maybe I can try now. Teach me that dance." Her eyes widened slightly. "Bachata?" He nodded, offering his hand. "If our son can do it, I can too." A small smile tugged at her lips. "You sure you're ready for that challenge?" "Maybe not," he said honestly. "But I want to try." Just as she was about to take his hand, a loud crack of thunder shook the house. A moment later, the lights flickered and went out. The storm outside had cut the power. The room went dark except for the faint glow from the candles on the table. Elena laughed softly, shaking her head. "Looks like the universe doesn't want us to dance tonight." Michael smiled in the dark. Maybe it just wants us to talk first. They stood there, surrounded by shadows and the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. For the first time in months, there was no noise between them. No phone buzzing, no TV, no distractions. Just silence and the soft sound of thunder. After a long pause, Elena said quietly, "I missed you." Michael's voice broke slightly. "I missed you too. I just didn't know how to come back." She looked up, her face faintly lit by candlelight. "Then start now." "Not tomorrow, not next week. Now." He nodded, and in the dim light, she could see the sincerity in his eyes. He reached for her hand, but instead of leading her into a dance, he just held it. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than any words could. They stayed like that for a long moment, the music still whispering softly through the darkened room. Elena smiled faintly. "Maybe next Friday, we'll dance," she said. Michael squeezed her hand gently. "Next Friday," he promised. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away the dust from the windows, just as quietly as they began to wash away the distance between them. The lights were gone, but something far more important had been switched back on. A spark that had waited too long in the dark. The next Friday arrived, with a calm evening breeze and the soft glow of sunset spilling through the kitchen window. The air felt lighter, as if the house itself could sense a change. Elena set the table quietly, her mind still replaying the moment from last week. Michael's hand reaching for hers in the dark, the quiet promise that they would dance again. She wasn't sure if he meant it, but for the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel foolish. Ethan came home early, carrying boxes filled with his college things. He was moving into the dorms the next morning. The house would feel emptier without him, and Elena tried not to think about that. "Need help packing?" she asked, keeping her tone light. "I'm almost done," he said, flashing her a smile. "But tonight's our last dance before I leave, right?" She smiled softly. "You don't forget, do you?" "Not a chance," he replied. "You taught me to feel the music. Can't quit now." Later, after dinner, Ethan turned on the radio like always. The familiar bachata rhythm filled the room, sweet and soulful. Elena hesitated for a second, feeling that bittersweet ache of knowing her boy was growing up. But she didn't want sadness to take over their last evening together. She placed her hand on his shoulder, and they began to dance. This time, the steps were smooth, graceful. Ethan had learned well. He spun her with confidence. They both laughed when she stumbled a little. The laughter echoed through the house, soft, genuine, warm. "You're a natural now," Elena said proudly. "That's because my teacher's the best," he said with a grin. For a moment, everything felt perfect. The music, the laughter, the comfort of being seen and loved. But underneath that happiness, Elena felt a quiet tug of sadness. Soon he'd be gone, chasing his dreams, and she'd have to face the quiet house again. She tried to hide the emotion behind her smile, but Ethan noticed. "Hey," he said gently, holding her still. "I'll come visit. You know that, right?" She nodded, blinking back tears. "Of course. You're just growing up so fast." He smiled softly. "You'll still have Dad." She wanted to believe that. Truly. The memory of Michael's promise flickered in her mind like a small flame. She didn't want to let die as the song came to an end. Ethan gave her a quick hug. "One day I'll dance like a pro," he said, pretending to bow. "You already dance from the heart," she said, patting his cheek. "That's what matters." He laughed and ran upstairs to finish packing. Elena stayed behind, lost in the music that was still playing. She didn't notice Michael standing in the doorway until she heard his quiet voice. "May I have this dance?" Elena turned, startled. He was standing there in a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a shy smile on his face. It had been years since he'd asked her that question. "Michael," she whispered, unsure if she heard him right. He stepped forward.